What you gotta understand about your mind is that it can only ever really be two things. It can either be your greatest ally or your greatest servant, or it's going to be a master that leads you to destruction. And for most people, it's the latter, right? Your mind is leading you around and you're not even aware of it. For example, you feel like getting some McDonald's and you automatically get some McDonald's. You feel tired, you automatically take a nap. You feel bored, you scroll TikTok, Instagram, you feel horny, you jerk off, so on and so forth. Like that's how most people move, right? Without a second thought. And that's because our brains are wired to seek comfort, to seek pleasure, and to run from discomfort, and to run from pain. And that's because there are so many modern day mechanisms that are innovated specifically for instantaneous gratification. You know, most of us have been conditioned to just let our minds lead us around. And the more susceptible you are to this, the less likely you'll ever reach a point where you are happy with who you are. Because your life and your reality has just become a manifestation of someone who gave into their very first instinct, their very first thought, which again is wired to seek comfort and to avoid pain. A lot of times when we seek out comfort, right, it's not that we're actually seeking out whatever that thing is, we're seeking out the feeling that's associated with that stimuli. Like for example, people that are fat, right, most of the times they're not eating because they're actually hungry, they're eating out of comfort or to fulfill some sort of void or pain that they're going through. And in that sense, most people are slaves to how they feel, we're slaves to our emotions. And that's essentially why the greatest battle you ever face in your entire life is the one against your own mind. And most people aren't even aware that it's a battle because it's not one. There's no resistance against where their mind takes them. You know, people often talk about how depression is this negative thing or it's heavily looked down upon like you're a weak person. But I actually think that it's a good thing as long as you don't actively choose to stay there. Like it's something that we've all experienced at some point in our life. Like no one's special for being depressed. You see, what most people don't understand about depression is that it's because you have an expectation that does not align with your reality. For example, you have an expectation of being with this girl and she rejected you. You have an expectation of nailing this interview for a job and they rejected you. You had an expectation of getting into this university and they rejected you as well. Or maybe you had an expectation of what your life should look like at 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and you're not there and you feel like a loser and now you're depressed. I think that's a good thing because that means you still have some standard for yourself that you desire to meet. You know, you haven't given up yet, and that disconnect is what elicits a negative feeling. Someone who's fully given up isn't depressed, he's actually happy to never accomplish anything because they've accepted their reality. And by the way, if that's no longer your expectation, then that's fine, right? To each their own. But it's when you haven't accepted that where you feel depressed, where you haven't accepted those circumstances. And that's essentially where the battle against your mind begins. And the key to winning the battle against your mind, the key to having an unstoppable mindset is that it has to come from your drive. It has to come from your willpower, your purpose, your reason, your faith, etc. You know, they say that the space between your stimuli and your reaction is where wisdom lies, and it's 100% true. Like the more control you have over that space in between, the more control you have over your mind. For example, right, you see an ad for a pizza and all of a sudden you want to order a pizza, but then you pause and you think to yourself, as bad as I want this pizza, I know that if I do, it's going to make me feel like shit, so I'm going to resist that feeling. Or you can put that desire at the end of accomplishing something, that way you're conditioning yourself to delay gratification. And you're only giving yourself that positive stimuli after you earned it. Like you don't just eat it just because you want to or just because you feel like it. And that's going to condition you to do what you're supposed to when you're supposed to. Like we've all heard of the marshmallow test, right? The kids that were able to delay eating the marshmallow ended up being more successful than the ones that didn't. And by the way, that willpower has to come from that fire inside of you. You know, it's that feeling when you refuse to quit. It's that feeling when you refuse to lose. And you feel it in your chest. It literally feels like your chest is getting hot when you have that feeling. And you gotta find a way to draw from that hunger. And that drive that you have deep down inside, your willpower, that fire, has to be greater than what your mind instinctually wants. That's the only way you're going to have an unstoppable mindset. I'll give you an example, right? In the beginning, as hard as it was for me to turn on this camera and speak to it knowing that people are going to see it, you know, I had a lot of that anxious, uncomfortable, deer in the headlights feeling. You know, as much as my mind was telling me to retreat because of those uncomfortable feelings, at the end of the day, my desire for impact was greater than that feeling, so it supersedes those fears. So whatever your desire or purpose is, it has to supersede that initial feeling. And that's where you're going to find your drive. That's where you're going to find your willpower and your fire. I'll give you another example, right? Maybe you have a desire to watch porn and jerk off. You gotta find a reason that's greater than that lust. Like, is this a version of myself that God is proud of? Is this a version of myself that's worthy of my future wife, the woman that I want? Is this a version of myself that my future kids would be proud of? And maybe you see it a bit differently, right? But the point is that reason has to be greater than what your mind instinctually wants. That's the only way you're going to win that battle against your mind. Like, you gotta have that clarity of purpose because that's what's always going to matter the most. That's when you stop eating junk food just because it popped in your head or because you saw an ad for a Big Mac. That's when you stop jerking off every time just because you felt like it or you were scrolling Instagram and you saw some hot chick. That's when you talked to that girl or went on that date even though you were super nervous and your natural instinct was to run and play it safe. What if it's awkward? What if I can't carry a conversation? What if she thinks I'm weird? What if it goes wrong? XYZ. It's the feeling that brings you to the gym when you don't feel like it. It's the feeling that makes you go that extra round in sparring even though you're gassed with nothing left. And also something else that's really going to help, right, is having faith in God, because that purpose is definitely going to supersede that initial desire. It's actually why most of the greatest fighters nowadays are religious. Most of those fighters are driven by faith to some degree, right? You look at a guy like Ilia Topuria or a guy like Khabib Nurmagomedov, a guy like Islam Makhachev, so on and so forth. For some people in the world, that fire burns like an inferno, right? Just driven, hungry, and motivated all the time. They got that no one can stop me, I refuse to lose type of energy. And for other people, that fire might be a bit dimmer, but it's in there somewhere for everyone. You just gotta learn how to draw from it to have that mindset that I'm not going to lose. Like literally, go to your bathroom and go stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself, I refuse to lose. I'm not gonna lose to anybody. I'm not gonna lose to myself. And also, something else that's a limiting mindset that holds a lot of people back that no one talks about is how much you hold reverence over what other people do. How much you look up to other people, right? That's why I always speak against celebrity worship. And again, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of great people, smart people that do a lot of great things. Just as the same goes the other way around. Like, you can take inspiration and appreciate those accomplishments, but don't ever put anyone on a pedestal or look at them as above you. Because oftentimes what happens is that people create a separation between them and the people they look up to. And you subconsciously think to yourself, whatever they can do, you can't because you want to look up to or live vicariously through those people. It's a kind of mental submission over your own life when you worship other people. And most people don't realize it, but it's actually what makes you insecure when you walk into a room or a social situation. The reason why you would be nervous around other people is because you subconsciously put them above yourself. It's why you're afraid to talk to girls, it's why you're afraid to go on a date with a woman, because you put them on a pedestal. It's a massive reason why a lot of people are afraid to go after opportunities or chase their dreams. Because you subconsciously think to yourself, all these amazing people are doing it and I can never be them. And because you can't be them, you think you can never do what they're doing or reach that level. Again, because you subconsciously created that separation between you and the people you place on a pedestal. And this is actually something that's very underrated that puts lots of limitations in people's minds as it pertains to what they can or can't do. Like, Steph Curry is better than you at shooting threes because he shot billions of threes more than you did. Just fixing every detail of his shot, from his footwork, the placing, the cadence of when he catches the ball, the rhythm, the timing, etc. You gotta believe that if you did the exact same thing for the exact same amount of time as he did, maybe you wouldn't be as good, maybe you would, who knows, right? But the point is, you have to have that mindset that you would be. You gotta believe that there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it and apply yourself. And also, why would you want to believe otherwise? Like, how would that possibly serve you in any way? For example, if you love basketball, if you have real aspirations of being in the NBA and your skills and your work ethic reflects that, you gotta have the mindset where, yeah, LeBron's good, yeah, Jordan's good, but I'm gonna be better. Because again, I genuinely don't believe how it would benefit you otherwise to believe so. It's a form of mental submission in your mind because it gives you an excuse not to try. To tell yourself that it was never going to work out anyways. The amount of cope and negative self-talk is crazy to me, because if you say that you're X, Y, and Z, then that's exactly what you're going to become. And the most insane thing about this is that your mind is literally the only thing that you have control over in this world. So if you don't have control over your mind, how are you supposed to shape your reality? If you care about something, you gotta protect it. If you have a goal you want to accomplish, then you gotta have a one-track mind. Especially nowadays when there's so many distractions in the world, distractions that you have no control over. You can't control if it rains tomorrow. You can't control if the stock market plummets. You can't control if the government makes up or stages events. You can't control what billionaire elites are doing. You can't control your boss. You can't control your friends, your family, etc. Like, your mind is quite literally the only thing you have control over. So whatever you do, make sure you got that unstoppable mindset. Anyways, hopefully you got some from that. Make sure you stay true. Talk to you real soon, and I'll see you at the top. Peace.